Mornings in Cedar Grove are always quiet, especially on Maple Lane, where I've lived for over 50 years. At 78, I've grown to appreciate the stillness, the way the sun filters through the lace curtains in my living room, and the birds that gather on the porch rail like clockwork. My body doesn't move the way it used to. My knees ache, and my back complains, but I get by. This house, though old and worn, holds every memory of my life with Frank, my late husband. He built the bookshelf in the corner and promised to fix the squeaky front step for years before his heart gave out on a rainy Tuesday 8 years ago. I still talk to him every morning as I water the plants. It's silly, I know, but it comforts me. So our children, Mason and Clara, were raised within these walls. I can still hear their footsteps, their arguments, their laughter echoing in the hallway. These days, Clara visits once a month, always in a hurry, always with a list of errands. Mason stops by more often, but usually for something. A signature, a check, a favor. He always promises to pay it back. He never does. Only Liam, my grandson, comes without an agenda. He's in college now, tall and kind-hearted, always bringing stories and a craving for my blueberry pie. I bake one every Wednesday. Not for me, I can't eat much sugar anymore, but for Liam, who makes me feel remembered. That Wednesday, I heard the front gate swing shut and his familiar footsteps on the porch. He walked with that same gentle awkwardness Frank had at his age. I smiled, already reaching for the tea kettle, unaware that what he'd say next would change everything. "Hi, Grandma," Liam called as he stepped inside, the smell of pie already filling the kitchen. "It's still warm," I said, placing a plate in front of him. "Made it just for you." He grinned and sat down, already digging in. "You really didn't have to." "I wanted to," I said, pouring him a cup of tea. "So, how's school?" He told me about a math project, a professor who finally remembered his name, and a girl named Brooke who liked old poetry as much as he did. He was halfway through his second slice when he asked, "Have you decided what you're going to wear on Friday?" I paused, my hand on the teapot. "Friday?" He looked at me, puzzled. "You know Mom and Dad's anniversary dinner, 35 years. They booked a private room at Riverbend." Something cold washed over me. I tried to smile. "Your father didn't mention anything to me." Liam blinked. "Oh, I just assumed. He told me he'd pick you up." I shook my head gently. No one said a word. He grew quiet. Maybe he forgot. Dad's always last minute. "Maybe," I said, but something inside me had shifted. Later that day, the phone rang. Mason's number lit up the screen. I answered with a smile in my voice, trying to believe there was an explanation. "Hey, Mom," he said, a little too cheerful. "Just wanted to give you a heads up, we're canceling the dinner on Friday. Cora's come down with something. Doctor says bed rest for at least a week." "Oh no," I said, "that's too bad. Do you need anything? I can drop off some soup or—" No, he cut in quickly. "We're covered. Just thought I'd let you know." He hung up before I could respond. I sat there, the dial tone echoing in my ear, my thoughts racing. If dinner was canceled, why hadn't he told me sooner? Why did Liam think it was still on? To clear my mind, I called Clara. She sounded distracted. "Cora's sick," I asked. "Sick?" Clara repeated. I don't know. I haven't talked to her." "But you're coming Friday, right?" A long pause. "Oh, yeah, right, of course." She hung up quickly, too quickly. Something was wrong. Not just forgotten, hidden, intentionally. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my armchair with the photo album on my lap, flipping through the worn pages. Mason at 5, missing a front tooth, proudly holding up a lopsided drawing. Clara on her first bike, Frank standing behind her with both hands outstretched, ready to catch her. Our Christmas dinners, birthdays, summers at the lake. I wondered when it all changed. When did I stop being the center of their world and start becoming a burden they managed? The next morning I went to the market, not for groceries, just to clear my head. I ran into Martha Jean, a retired school teacher and longtime friend of our family. She worked part-time at the same florist shop as Clara. "Big celebration tomorrow, huh?" she said with a smile. "Clara told me she's taking the evening off. 35 years is a big deal." I stared at her. "Oh, I thought it was canceled." Martha looked puzzled. "No, the reservation's been in for weeks. Private room at Riverbend. Fancy one, too?" I thanked her and walked home slowly, my heart heavy but my mind sharper than it had felt in years. So the dinner was still happening. They had lied. And not just a little white lie. They went out of their way to keep me away. pretended to care, pretended to call. All so I'd stay home, alone, thinking I wasn't forgotten. I didn't cry. I didn't get angry. I just stood in front of the closet and pulled out the dress I hadn't worn since Frank's funeral. Navy blue, simple, dignified. It still fit, though I'd lost weight. I laid it on the bed and looked in the mirror. If they didn't want me there, I said quietly, then I need to see why. Tomorrow I would go. Friday evening arrived cloaked in gray clouds, the kind that made the town of Cedar Grove look even smaller than it was. I stood at my window for a long while holding a cup of untouched tea, thinking about everything and nothing. My dress was pressed and ready. My shoes were clean. I'd even put on a touch of lipstick. At 5 p.m. I called a cab. The driver was a young man with earbuds and tattoos. When I gave him the name of the restaurant Riverbend, he raised an eyebrow. "Swanky place?" he said. "Special occasion?" "Yes," I replied, steady as stone. "Family reunion." He didn't ask more questions. When we arrived, I asked him to stop just short of the main entrance. "Wait here for me," I said. "Just in case." The restaurant stood by the river, all brick and ivy, with twinkling lights already glowing in the windows. I didn't go in through the front. I walked around the side toward the guest parking lot. That's when I saw them. Mason's silver SUV, Clara's beige sedan, Liam's dusty old Honda. All here, all parked. No mistake. I kept walking until I reached a set of windows partially covered with curtains. Through the gap, I saw them. A large round table in the center of the room, champagne flutes raised, Cora beaming in a red dress, perfectly healthy, Mason giving a toast, Clara laughing beside her husband, Liam and his girlfriend. Even a few faces I didn't recognize, friends, probably. They were all there. All of them except me. A knot tightened in my chest, but I didn't cry. Instead, I straightened my shoulders and walked around to the main entrance. At the door stood a tall man in a navy vest with a gold name tag. "Good evening, Mama. Do you have a reservation?" "No," I said, meeting his eyes, "but I believe the Hayes family is celebrating tonight. I'm Eleanor Hayes, Mason's mother." The man blinked. Then his face softened. "Of course, please come in." I stepped inside the lobby, the warm lighting brushing across my face. Everything smelled of rosemary and roast lamb. Just then, a voice called out behind me, "Eleanor?" I turned to see him, Lewis Hartman, owner of Riverbend, and once, many years ago, the boy who lived across the street from us. He'd been quiet, always borrowing books and asking for seconds on pie. He looked older now, with silver in his beard and kindness still in his eyes. "You haven't changed," he said with a smile. "Oh, but I have," I replied, "and apparently so has my family." He looked at me, puzzled, then serious. "Did they not invite you?" "They lied to keep me away." A long pause. "Well," he said, offering his arm, "let's not keep them waiting." I nodded, slipped my hand into his, and together, we walked toward the banquet hall, toward a truth none of them were ready for. The moment Lewis opened the doors to the banquet hall, a hush seemed to ripple through the room. Laughter faded. Silverware paused midair. Conversations froze. We walked slowly, steadily, toward the large round table at the center. I kept my eyes on Mason and Clara. Mason had just finished a toast and was laughing until he saw me. He choked slightly, his face draining of color. Cora's smile faltered. Clara's wine glass trembled in her hand. Liam was the first to react. He stood up quickly, startled. "Grandma?" I gave him a small nod and smile before turning to the rest of them. Mason stood too, pushing out his chair in a fluster. "Mom, you're here. You said you weren't feeling well." "No," I said evenly. "You told me the dinner was canceled. You said Cora was sick. But here she is looking quite radiant." Cora blinked. I felt better this morning." "How miraculous," I replied, glancing around the table. "So many healthy faces for a canceled celebration." The room went silent again. All eyes locked on me. Lewis, ever the gentleman, pulled out a chair between Liam and a woman I didn't recognize. I sat down calmly, folding my hands in my lap. "I didn't come to ruin your evening," I said. "I came to see it for myself. I needed to be sure it wasn't a mistake, that you hadn't simply forgotten. But no, you planned it this way. You lied to keep me away." Clara opened her mouth, but I raised a hand. "I'm speaking now." I reached into my purse and pulled out a white envelope, setting it gently on the table. "I brought a few things with me, just in case." Mason's eyes darted to the envelope, suspicion rising. This, I said, sliding the first document forward, is confirmation that I sold the house 3 days ago. The one you were both so eager for me to sign over. It's gone now, to a young couple with 2 small kids. They'll breathe new life into it. Clara gasped. Mason's mouth fell open. And this, I said, pulling out a second document, is a donation confirmation. The money from the sale, nearly $500,000, has been given to Cedar Grove Public Library. They're naming the new children's wing after your father, Frank Hayes. He loved that library. Someone across the table dropped a fork. Liam stared at me, wide-eyed. Grandma. I'm not finished, I said gently, and placed the final document down. My revised will, what little remains savings, belongings goes to Liam. The only person at this table who ever visited me because he wanted to, not because he needed something. Mason's face flushed red. Cora stared down at the tablecloth. Clara looked like she might cry. I looked at them all, not with anger, not with hatred, but with clarity. You wanted a party without me, I said, and now you have one. But you also have the truth. What you choose to do with it, that's up to you. For a moment, no one at the table said a word. You could have heard the faint clink of a spoon from across the room. Mason looked as if he were about to speak, but he couldn't seem to find the right words. Clara stared into her glass like she was searching for an escape at the bottom of it. Cora looked anywhere but at me. Only Liam met my eyes. Grandma, he said softly, I didn't know. I swear I thought you'd been invited. I know, sweetheart, I replied, placing my hand on his gently. This isn't about you. Mason finally cleared his throat. Mom, I think we should talk about this, just not here. Let's go somewhere private. We can explain. No, I said. You've done enough explaining. I heard the lies. I saw the truth with my own eyes. I don't need more words. I need respect. Clara looked up, voice trembling. We didn't mean to hurt you. But you did, I said, steady and calm, and I let it happen for far too long. I stood smoothing my dress, suddenly aware of how tall I felt, not because of height, but because I was no longer small in their eyes or mine. You taught me, each of you, that love can fade when it's not convenient. But I've learned something too. I've learned that love without dignity isn't love at all. It's dependence. And I'm done depending. So Liam started to rise as if to walk me out, but I shook my head gently. Stay. Enjoy the evening. You deserve to be here. I turned to Louis, who had been watching from the distance with a soft, quiet expression. Would you mind calling that cab again? I asked him. Already did, he said, stepping forward with a hint of a smile. It's waiting outside. As I walked away from the table, the silence behind me said more than their words ever could. For the first time in decades, I wasn't chasing anyone's approval. I wasn't hoping to be chosen. I had chosen myself. And I was finally free. 3 months have passed since that night at Riverbend. The sky outside my new apartment glows with the gentle gold of spring, and from my 3rd-floor window I can see the town square coming to life. Children dart across the grass. Couples walk hand in hand past the old fountain. And across the street stands the Cedar Grove Public Library with a brand new wing bearing Frank's name. My life is different now, smaller, simpler, but lighter. I volunteer at the library 3 mornings a week, mostly in the children's section. I read to toddlers, help grade schoolers pick their first novels, and sometimes just listen when teenagers come in needing someone to talk to. No one there cares what I own or what I left behind. They just see me, as I am. Mason calls now. At first it was daily, then every few days, always with a softer voice than before. Clara came by once, brought flowers from her shop, and stayed for tea. She didn't say much, just looked around the apartment like she was trying to understand how I had built something without them. I don't shut them out, but I don't let them in too easily either. Trust is not something I give away anymore. It has to be earned. The money's gone, and I think they've finally accepted it. The donations were finalized, the contracts signed. There's nothing left for them to chase, just me, their mother, if they want that. Louis has become something of a friend. He stops by the library on quiet afternoons with a cup of chai and stories from the restaurant. We've gone to the community theater twice, and once he even invited me to dinner with his sister. Nothing more than companionship, but for the first time in years, I've allowed someone new into my circle. Someone who asks nothing of me but my company. As I sip my tea by the window, a breeze carries the scent of blooming jasmine through the screen. It smells like a beginning. Not every ending is bitter. Some simply close the chapter so the next one can finally begin. And this is mine. Today is a special day. At 3 sharp, Liam arrives at my door, wearing a tie that's slightly crooked and holding a bouquet of lilies he picked up on the way. "You ready for your big moment, Grandma?" he grins. I laugh, smoothing my navy blue dress, the same one I wore that night. "It's not a big moment, Liam. Just a ribbon and a plaque." "No," he says. "It's more than that. It's a legacy." When we arrive at the library, the crowd is already gathering. The mayor is shaking hands. Volunteers are adjusting folding chairs and passing out lemonade. I see familiar faces, neighbors, students, librarians, even parents whose children I now read to. And there, near the entrance to the new wing, covered in a silky cloth, is the golden plaque, the Frank Hayes Children's Wing. Miss Patterson, the head librarian, waves us over. "Eleanor, everyone's been waiting for you." The ceremony begins with speeches. The mayor says something about community spirit. Miss Patterson talks about dreams and generosity, and then she calls me to the podium. I take a deep breath. "Thank you all," I begin. "This wing is named after my husband, Frank, who believed in the magic of stories and the power of education. He read to our children every night, even when he was tired. He believed that a well-loved book could change a child's life." I look out at the audience. I spot Mason and Clara standing near the back. Clara gives me a small nod. Mason's eyes are downcast. My hope is that this place becomes a sanctuary for children to learn, to wonder, to grow. Because life isn't measured by what you own. It's measured by what you give. The crowd applauds. Liam helps me cut the ribbon. Cameras flash. The cloth is pulled back. There it is, Frank's name, gleaming in the sunlight. As the crowd disperses, Louis appears beside me, holding 2 paper cups of lemonade. "To beginnings," he says. "To choosing yourself," I reply. And that's exactly what I've done. I don't know what comes next. I don't know if Mason and Clara will ever understand how much they hurt me. But I'm no longer waiting for that. I'm no longer waiting for anything. Because this life, it's mine now. And I intend to live every last page of it, on my own terms. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like, share, and leave a comment. Because sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is to walk away and begin again.